Hi, this is Dr. James Hutcherson, and we're going to be talking about water, electrolyte, and acid-base balance. So water and electrolytes are interdependent in the body. That means they work together. A change in one causes a change in the other. Electrolytes, also called ions, are dissolved in water. And the most important electrolytes are sodium, potassium, calcium, hydrogen, hydroxide, chloride, and magnesium. Homeostasis requires that amounts of water and electrolytes that enter the body equal amounts exiting. The balance is maintained by mechanisms that replace lost water and electrolytes and excrete excesses. As far as our distribution in the body fluids are not uniformly distributed. They occupy compartments of different volumes containing varying compositions, and water and electrolyte movement between those compartments is going to be regulated to stabilize their distribution and the composition of body fluids. Average adult females are about 52% water by weight, and males about 63%. Females have more adipose tissue, so it's lower in water, and males have more muscle, which happens to be higher in water. There's about 40 liters of water with dissolved electrolytes in the body, distributed into two major compartments. There's the intracellular fluids, that's fluid inside of cells, and then extracellular fluids, which are fluids outside of cells. And this graphic shows you the different volumes, or percentages, I should say, between extracellular and intracellular fluids. Okay, the intracellular fluid compartment, it's all water and electrolytes, which happen to be inside the cell membranes, and it contains 63% of the body water. Extracellular fluid compartment contains 37% of the body water and consists of various fluids outside the cells. Interstitial fluid is in the tissue spaces, blood plasma is in blood vessels, lymph is in lymphatic vessels, and transcellular fluid is separated from other extracellular fluids by epithelial layers consisting of cerebrospinal fluid, aqueous and vitreous humors in the eye, synovial fluid in the joints, and then serous fluids. And this shows you the percent of the different types of body water in the fluid compartments. Body fluid composition. All body fluids are solutions of electrolytes in water. Extracellular fluids are all similar in composition and have high concentrations of sodium, chloride, calcium, and bicarbonate ions. Blood plasma contains more proteins than interstitial fluid or lymph. And intracellular fluid has a high concentration of potassium, magnesium, phosphates, sulfate ions. The two major factors that regulate the movement of fluid from one compartment to another are hydrostatic pressure and osmotic pressure. Hydrostatic pressure remains equal and stable in cells and interstitial fluids. Osmotic pressure is exerted by impermeant solutes. Most fluid movement results from changes in osmotic pressure. Okay, this figure shows you the body fluid composition as far as the different ions. Okay, extracellular versus intracellular. And you can see there's quite a difference. Okay, as far as movement of fluids between the compartments. So fluid leaves plasma at the arteriolar ends of the capillaries because the outward force of hydrostatic pressure predominates. Fluid returns to the plasma at the venular ends of the capillaries because the inward force of colloid osmotic pressure predominates. Hydrostatic pressure within the interstitial spaces forces fluid into lymph capillaries, and interstitial fluid is in equilibrium with transcellular and intracellular fluids. Okay, water balance. This exists when water intake and metabolic production equals water output. Control of both water intake and output are required for homeostasis. Water intake is controlled by the thirst centers in the brain. Water output is controlled by the kidneys. As far as water intake, daily amount varies among individuals. Averages about 2,500 milliliters daily for an adult. So 60% from drinking fluids, 30% from moist foods, and 10% as a byproduct of oxidative metabolism of nutrients. This is called water of metabolism. Thirst is primary regulator of water intake. Thirst sensations derive from changes in the volume or osmotic pressure of extracellular fluids. Osmotic pressure is due to presence of impermeant solutes, which cannot cross the cell membranes. Osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus detect changes in the osmotic pressure of body fluids. A response to loss of 1% of body water, osmoreceptors will detect an increase in osmotic pressure and stimulate thirst mechanisms. Stretch receptors in blood vessels will detect water loss due to hemorrhage and stimulate thirst centers. A decrease in blood pressure activates renin-angiotensin systems. Angiotensin II then stimulates the thirst center. And drinking fluids results in stomach distension, which inhibits thirst centers. So the body loses as little as 1% of its water. An increase in the osmotic pressure of extracellular fluid due to water loss stimulates osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus. Activity in the hypothalamus causes the person to feel thirsty and to seek water. Drinking and the resulting distension of the stomach by water stimulates impulses that inhibit the thirst centers. Water is absorbed through the walls of the stomach and the small intestine, and the osmotic pressure of extracellular fluid will return to normal. As far as water output, about 2,500 milliliters per day, which equals to water intake. Water can be lost by a variety of methods: 60% through urine, 6% through feces, 6% lost in sweat, we call this sensible perspiration, and 28% is lost through a combination of evaporation from the skin, we call that insensible perspiration, and from the lungs during breathing. Water output varies with temperature, humidity, and activity level. Water output can be adjusted if the intake is changed. Okay, as far as regulation of the water output, distal tubules and collecting ducts of the kidneys are effectors of mechanisms that control the amount of water excreted in urine. Distal tubules and collecting ducts are impermeable to water, except in the presence of ADH, or antidiuretic hormone. Osmoreceptor ADH mechanisms in the hypothalamus. This regulates the concentration of the urine produced in the kidney. During dehydration, excess water loss causes osmoreceptors to lose water and shrink, and this stimulates ADH secretion. ADH increases permeability of the renal distal tubules and the collecting ducts to water, increases reabsorption and conservation of the water. After drinking excess water intake causes osmoreceptors to swell. ADH is inhibited. Distal tubules and collecting ducts are impermeable to water. And water reabsorption decreases and the urine volume increases. Okay, these are the vents in regulation of water output, as we have talked about. This figure shows you water intake and output amounts, percentages. Okay, some water balance disorders. Dehydration. So you have a water deficiency in which the output exceeds intake. Extracellular fluid becomes concentrated and water leaves the cells by osmosis. Wastes accumulate in the extracellular fluid, leading to nervous system issues. Temperature regulation mechanisms can fail due to a lack of water for sweating, resulting in hyperthermia. Okay, hypotonic hydration, or water intoxication. Excess fluid intake can result in hyponatremia, which means low blood levels of sodium. This creates an imbalance between water and electrolytes. And edema. This is an abnormal accumulation of extracellular fluid in the interstitial spaces. is caused by a decrease in plasma proteins, obstruction of lymphatic vessels, increased capillary permeability, or venous pressure and inflammation. This table shows you factors that are associated with edema, such as low plasma protein concentration. Causes include liver disease and failure to synthesize proteins, kidney disease and loss of proteins in the urine, and the lack of protein in the diet due to starvation. And this can lead to plasma osmotic pressure decreases. You have less fluid that is reabsorbed at the venular ends of the capillaries by osmosis. Another factor, obstruction of lymph vessels. Surgical removal of portions of the lymphatic pathways in certain parasitic infections can cause this. You would have back pressure in the lymph vessels interfering with the movement of fluid from the interstitial spaces into the lymph capillaries. Another factor, increased venous pressure. This causes venous obstructions or faulty venous valves. A back pressure in veins increases the capillary filtration and interferes with return of fluid from the interstitial spaces into the venular ends of the capillaries. And then the last factor, inflammation. And this can be caused by tissue damage. Vasodilation and increased capillary permeability will lead to increased filtration. Now let's talk about electrolyte balance. So electrolyte balance exists when quantities of electrolytes gained by the body equals those lost. Kidneys change the quantities of electrolytes excreted in urine to keep body fluid composition in homeostasis. Electrolyte intake. Most important electrolytes for cellular functions are sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, chloride, sulfate, phosphate, bicarbonate, and hydrogen ion. Sources of electrolytes include food mainly, and some are from water and other beverages, and some are byproducts of metabolism. As far as regulation of electrolyte intake, usual electrolyte intake is sufficient by responding to hunger and thirst. Severe electrolyte deficiency may cause salt cravings. Methods of electrolyte output. The greatest electrolyte output is through urine production. Kidneys adjust the electrolyte losses in the urine. They regulate the composition of body fluids and maintain homeostasis. Some are lost in sweat or perspiring. You have more of this on warmer days and during strenuous exercise. And some are lost in the feces. Okay, regulation of electrolyte output. Concentrations of positively charged ions such as sodium, potassium, and calcium are of particular importance. It's vital for nerve impulse conduction, muscle fiber contraction, and maintenance of cell membrane permeability. Potassium maintains resting potential in nerve and cardiac muscle cells. Sodium ions account for almost 90% of positively charged ions in extracellular fluid. Aldosterone. This is a hormone that regulates both sodium and potassium ion concentrations. High potassium concentrations stimulate secretion of aldosterone, which increases tubular reabsorption of sodium and tubular secretion of potassium. Okay, a decrease in plasma calcium levels will stimulate secretion of parathyroid hormone, which causes an increase in the plasma calcium levels. Some negative ions, such as chloride, are transported along with positive ions, such as sodium. This chart shows you the electrolyte balance when intake equals output. This figure shows you the regulation of electrolyte output that we talked about. Clinical application, sodium and potassium imbalances. Hyponatremia, this is low blood sodium concentration. It's caused by prolonged sweating, vomiting, drinking too much water. Effects are hypotonic extracellular fluid, uptake of water by cells by osmosis. Hypernatremia, this is high blood sodium concentration, caused by excess water loss, as in fever, diabetes insipidus. Effects are central nervous system disturbances, like confusion, stupor, and coma. Hypokalemia, this is low blood potassium concentration. It's caused by some diuretics, kidney disease, and decrease in extracellular hydrogen ion. Effects are muscle weakness or paralysis, cardiac disturbances, and breathing problems. And then hyperkalemia. This is high blood potassium concentration. It's caused by renal disease and aldosterone deficiency. Effects are skeletal muscle paralysis and cardiac disturbances. Figure 21C. The effect of body water and sodium concentration at normal hydration, overhydration resulting in hyponatremia, and dehydration resulting in hyponatremia are pictured here. Acid-base balance. So acids are electrolytes that ionize in water and release hydrogen ions. Bases are substances which release ions that combine with hydrogen ions and therefore lower their concentration in body fluids. Acid-base balance involves regulation of the hydrogen ion concentrations in body fluids. It's important because slight changes in hydrogen concentrations can alter the rates of enzyme-controlled metabolic reactions, a shift in the distribution of other ions, or alter hormone actions. pH number indicates the degree to which a solution is acidic or basic, otherwise known as alkaline. The more acidic the solution, the lower its pH. The more basic or alkaline, the higher its pH. Normal pH of internal environment of the body is 7.35 to 7.45. Most hydrogen ions are byproducts of metabolic reactions, but digestive tracts absorb some of that. Figure 21.9 shows you different sources of hydrogen ions. Okay, acids. We can actually divide these into strong acids or weak acids. Strong acids ionize more completely and release more hydrogen ions. An example, hydrochloric acid in gastric juice. Then there's weak acids. They ionize less completely and release fewer hydrogen ions. An example, carbonic acid. It's produced when CO2 combines with water. And then we also have strong and weak bases. Strong bases ionize more completely and release more hydroxide ion, or other negatively charged ions that combine with hydrogen ions. An example, sodium hydroxide. Weak bases, these ionize less completely and release fewer hydroxide ions, or other negative ions. Example, sodium bicarbonate, or bicarbonate, which can act as a base. Either an acid shift or an alkaline shift in the body fluids could endanger internal environments. Normal metabolic reactions generally produce more acid than base. Examples, cellular metabolism of glucose, fatty acids, and amino acids. Maintenance of acid-base balance usually eliminates acids in one of three ways: chemical buffer systems, respiratory excretion of carbon dioxide, or renal excretion of hydrogen ions. Let's talk about chemical buffer systems. These are in all the body fluids, and they're based on chemicals that combine with excess acids or bases. Buffers are substances that stabilize pH of a solution, even when an acid or base is added. Buffers minimize pH changes in body fluids. Buffer components combine with strong acids to convert them to weak acids, and with strong bases to convert them to weak bases. Bicarbonate buffer systems, they're found in intracellular and extracellular fluids. The bicarbonate ion acts as a weak base and converts a strong acid to a weak acid. Carbonic acid acts as a weak acid. It converts a strong base to a weak base. If conditions are acidic, reaction will proceed towards the right, and hydrogen ions will be taken up. If conditions are basic, reactions will proceed towards the left, or hydrogen ions being produced. Okay, the phosphate buffer system. This is found in intracellular and extracellular fluids. It's important in intracellular fluid, renal tubular fluid, and urine. Monohydrogen phosphate ion, or HPO4, acts as a weak base in the presence of excess hydrogen ions. and it binds to it to form a phosphate or phosphoric acid, which minimizes an increase in free hydrogen ions. Dihydrogen phosphate ion, H2PO4, acts as a weak acid in alkaline fluids, releases hydrogen ions to turn conditions more acidic. Okay, acidic conditions cause a reaction to proceed towards the right, binding hydrogen ions. Basic conditions shift reactions toward the left, releasing hydrogen ions. And then we have protein buffer systems. These consist of plasma proteins, albumin, hemoglobin, and certain cell proteins. NH2 and COOH groups buffer acidity or alkalinity by accepting or releasing hydrogen ions. Hemoglobin buffers hydrogen ions in blood by temporarily binding to them as they travel in venous blood. Table 21.3 summarizes the chemical acid-base buffer systems. Okay, what about respiratory excretion of carbon dioxide? Well, your respiratory system is located in the brainstem. It helps regulate hydrogen concentrations in body fluids by controlling the rate and depth of breathing. Increased production of CO2 by body cells leads to formation of carbonic acid, which then dissociates into hydrogen and bicarbonate ions. An increase in free hydrogen ion lowers the pH in the body fluids. In response to increased acidity, the respiratory center increases the rate and depth of breathing. This figure shows you respiratory excretion of carbon dioxide. Okay, renal excretion of hydrogen ions. Nephrons help regulate the hydrogen ion concentration of body fluids by excreting hydrogen ions in the urine. Hydrogen ions are added into the renal tubules by tubular secretion. Hydrogen ion secretion is linked to tubular reabsorption of bicarbonate ions. When acids appear in the body fluids as a result of metabolic processes, reabsorbed HCO3 ions bind to free hydrogen ions to form carbonic acid. This buffering mechanism prevents body fluids from becoming too acidic. Breakdown of certain amino acids produces phosphoric or sulfuric acids, so a high protein diet can produce excess acids. Kidneys compensate for extra acidity by increasing tubular secretion of hydrogen ions and increased excretion in the urine. Okay, this figure shows you renal excretion of hydrogen ions. So various regulators of hydrogen ion concentration function at different rates. Acid-base chemical buffers. They function rapidly, almost immediately. They convert strong acids or bases to weak acids or bases. First line of defense against pH changes. Physiological buffers or respiratory and renal mechanisms. They function more slowly. Respiratory works within minutes. Renal systems take 1 to 3 days. This is the second line of defense against pH changes. Chemical and physiological buffer systems usually maintain the hydrogen ion concentration of body fluids within very narrow pH ranges, 7.38 to 7.45 in the arterial blood. Abnormal conditions may disturb the acid-base balance. In acidemia, the pH is below 7.35. The condition is called acidosis. It's caused by accumulation of acids or a loss of bases, an increase in hydrogen ion concentration in body fluids. Alkalemia occurs when the pH is above 7.45. The condition is called alkalosis. It's caused by accumulation of bases or a loss of acids, and is a decrease in hydrogen ion concentration in body fluids. Acid-base imbalances are called respiratory if they're caused by respiratory problems, and metabolic if caused by other types of disturbance. There's two major types of acidosis. Respiratory acidosis is caused by an increase in CO2 and carbonic acid levels in the blood. It may include respiratory insufficiency, which includes labored breathing and cyanosis. The causes: injury to the respiratory centers in the brainstem, obstruction of air passages, and diseases that hinder gas exchange. In metabolic acidosis, it's caused by accumulation of other acids or loss of bases. Causes include kidney disease with decreased ability to excrete acids, prolonged diarrhea, diabetes mellitus, in which acidic ketones are produced. Symptoms of acidosis include it being derived from reduced function of central nervous systems and drowsiness, disorientation, stupor, and cyanosis. This graphic shows the factors leading to respiratory metabolic acidosis. There's two major types of alkalosis. In respiratory alkalosis, it's caused by excess loss of CO2 or carbonic acid. It results from hyperventilation due to anxiety, fever, poisoning, high altitude breathing, and playing musical instruments. In metabolic alkalosis, this results from excess loss of hydrogen ions or accumulation of bases. The causes include gastric drainage, vomiting of stomach contents, diuretics, and taking excess antacids. Symptoms of alkalosis include agitation, dizziness, lightheadedness, and tingling. Also, you might have tetanic muscle contractions in severe cases. This figure shows you the factors leading to respiratory and metabolic alkalosis. Okay, compensation. This is a resistance to a pH shift during an acid-base imbalance. It's accomplished by changes in the action of various chemical buffers, respiratory CO2 excretion, and renal hydrogen ion excretion. An example: compensation for metabolic alkalosis due to excess antacids. In this case, chemical buffers release hydrogen ions to lower the pH. Rate and depth of breathing will decrease, which retains CO2 and lowers pH. Kidneys decrease tubular secretion of hydrogen ions, retaining them. Another example: compensation for respiratory acidosis due to pulmonary disease. Chemical buffers bind to hydrogen ions to remove them from the body fluids. Respiratory systems are unable to help with compensation in this case. Increased hydrogen ion secretion in kidneys and increased excretion in urine occur. And that's the end of this presentation.